Okay, I'm going to point to something called radiant nature, but I don't want anyone to take this as a definition or as an intellectual understanding. So what I'm pointing to is really experiential. Just try to feel into what it is I'm talking about as if it's already in your experience. So when I'm pointing in the way I'm going to point, try not to apply what I'm saying to your experience, but rather notice how it's already coming forth from your experience. So it may be subtle, and it may seem to seep in through the overlay or what you consider usual experience. But if you're trying to force what I'm saying onto your experience or trying to find it in your experience, it may be too heavy-handed, too heady. So again, it's really a feel thing. It's an intuition thing. And just try to follow along with what I'm saying with keeping your attention in the visual field in front of you. So you can be watching this video or turn to the side and look at something on the wall or look at an object across the room or just take in the visual plane that's in front of your face. So what I mean by radiant nature is that the usual way we see or the usual way we perceive the visual field is something that's out there, apart from us, in front of us at some distance, or it could be at more than one distance. There are near objects and far objects. And those objects that are out there somewhere are made up of colors, primarily, but also sort of forms and shapes and lines. But if you just take in the visual field, it's very clear that there are color patterns out there. So that's the way the mind usually puts things together. So I'm going to make an analogy, and that is, if you're looking at the room, but you're not looking at it directly, you're actually turned away from it 180 degrees, but you're holding a mirror up in front of your face. So you're looking at the reflection of the room. The room is not actually in the mirror. The mirror is a two-dimensional experience, and it's exactly as far away from your face as you're holding it. So you can't reach into that mirror. That mirror doesn't have depth. Although the image in the mirror seems to have depth, it doesn't really. And most importantly, you're not actually looking at the phenomena, you're looking at a reflection of the phenomena. So the appearances in the mirror are actually a reflection of the primary appearance. So this is how it is with a visual overlay. The mind is like a mirror, and even when our thoughts calm down, there are still subtle thought layers that add something to our experience that aren't there. In this sense gate, two are very prominent. One is distance, so distance from us, and the other is separation or otherness. So it really appears like there are objects out there that are other than us, that are other than that which is viewing it, even if we're not thinking about what we are. Or even if we feel like we are consciousness or universal consciousness, or if we feel like we are awareness, it still appears in a simple sense like there are objects out there somehow, and there's awareness that's aware of them. It's dualistic. And it also feels like or appears as the colors and the forms and shapes, but primarily the colors in the field in front of you, are somehow contained in those objects at a distance. And what makes them objects is they are not the subject. Again, the dualistic nature makes this appear like there's objects out there, or there are objects out there, and they contain color, and that color is what you're receiving. You're receiving the color as information to tell you something's out there. Now, when I'm talking about radiant nature, it's important to recognize all of what I just said is an overlay. That is the mirror. That's the mirror you're looking through to see the real world, to see the world that is not actually subject to that kind of distortion of the overlay. The world that's not in space. It's not in one place. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or it doesn't mean it's nowhere, or it doesn't mean it's nothing. It simply means it's not bound by somethingness. It's not bound by being an object to a subject. It's not bound by the mental formations that make it appear as something out there transmitting information that's being received by something in here. Again, even though we take that for granted and very quickly we believe that to be what we're seeing, it's not the primary experience of seeing. The primary experience of seeing has no distance. It's not out there somewhere. When you see it clearly, when you see it as it actually is, the colors you're experiencing aren't in one place. They're not at one distance. They're at every distance. They're 3 feet in front of you, 2 feet in front of you, 1 foot in front of you, 1 millimeter in front of you, and they're where the subject feels like it is. And they're behind the subject. And they're at an infinite number of positions in every direction. This part is very hard to accept if you're still bound into mind identification, the belief that the world is the way you think it is. But once you've gone through awakening and you start to see that the world of thought is truly an overlay, it's a world of illusion, it's a world of filters and lenses, then this starts to become far more believable. That the color you're picking up, or let's just call it the seeing that's being experienced, it isn't at a specified distance. And most importantly, it's not only out there. I won't say it's not out there, but it's just as much in here as it's out there. It's just as much behind as in front. It's just as much close as it is far. It has no specified distance. It has no specified location. So in one sense, you could say it's in every location. But the experience itself primarily doesn't change. Before we turn it into an object through subject-object experience, and before we put it at a distance through apparent knowledge, it's just everywhere. It's radiant. So the radiance is when we see color as it actually is. When we see seeing as it actually is, it's radiant in nature. It's very intimate. It's bright. It's everywhere. It's not limiting. It's not limited. It doesn't make you feel small. It doesn't make you feel like a seer. It doesn't make you feel like a subject. Because it's everything. It's everything everywhere all the time. Now I understand from the conventional way of thinking, this is absurd. It makes no sense. And yet it can be realized directly. When this is directly realized, it comes simultaneously with a knowing that there's no solidity to anything. There aren't objects specifically. There's not objects out there. In fact, there's not even an out there any more than there's an in here. The sense of space is added on to the radiant nature of seeing when the sense of an object is added on to the radiant nature of seeing. Now understand, you can't actually add anything to it. What you're really doing is you're looking through a mirror. You're looking through the lens of mind. So what's radiant and all-encompassing and intimate and both here and there and also nowhere and also everywhere feels like it's contained in this small object out there radiating some information or transmitting some information to the eyes and to the mind. But that's all an illusion. And as you let that illusion drop and let all of the illusions of solidity, distance, agency drop again and again and again, the radiant nature presents itself naturally. It's already here. Again, it might feel very subtle at first, and yet over time, when the mind stops making so much noise, or more importantly, the perceptual filters start to drop, the radiant nature, the intimate, vibrant nature, the alive nature of experience, of seeing, makes itself known. And once you see this, it's so thoroughly enjoyable, you could stare at it all day long. You don't have to, but you can. It's there whether you're sitting, standing, walking, moving, still, taking a bath, washing dishes, working, meditating. So this is what I mean by radiant nature, or radiant clarity. It's not at a distance. It's also not limited to being close. It's both close and far, or you could say it's neither close nor far. It's too real to be designated in that way. It's also not graspable because it's so close, it's so intimate. So how to investigate this? Very simply, just sit, be still. calm the mind for a few minutes if you have to. And then just ask yourself, with what's being seen here, or what I'm seeing, what if I drop the impression that it's either near or far? What if I drop the impression that there's something out there being seen and something in here seeing it? Let those fall. Now what is it? Now how is it? What if I drop the tendency to make a label, to call it something, even to call it a sense, to call it color, light, object? What if I let all those labels drop? Now what is it? What does it appear as? How does it feel to experience this radiant nature? So again, we're not trying to analyze any of this. We're just returning attention again and again to the most primary experience possible. The experience that your mind isn't doing anything to. The experience that's so close you can't even call it an experience because there's nothing apart from it. So we can do this through a sort of subtractive inquiry, but we have to keep our attention fully in the sense field. And then just ask, what is this without labels? What is this without purpose or meaning? What is this without being somewhere specific in space? What is this neither in front of nor behind? What is this if it's neither big or small? And just keep looking to the visual experience for the answer. The answer is the visual experience, of course, but you might notice it starts to change in subtle ways. You might notice it starts to change in profound ways, but just keep at it. That radiant clarity will make itself known at some point in a very real way. Then you'll be able to carry it with you. And at some point you'll realize you don't have to carry it, it's already there all the time. Then it just becomes a naturally deep, direct contemplation out of pure enjoyment, pure joy, pure fascination, pure innocence. That's radiant nature.